Hello, my name is Stephen Skiles, and I am a computer science major at Brigham Young University, Idaho. For the last couple of weeks, I have been learning how to use a game engine named Unity. And for the last couple of weeks, inside of Unity, I have created an FPS demo where the player will be in the first person perspective and they will shoot at enemies that will spawn. Here is a small demo of what I was able to accomplish over the last couple of weeks. So I'll first start off by showing you the scene view of the game or the project. So right here we have the player, and you can notice that there's the camera right there where his face is. That's the player's perspective, and then there's a couple of audio sources for the gunshot sound effects and for the music. And then here are some of the enemies that are spawned right at the beginning. And then there's the spawner right there where the rest of them come in. And then from there, I'll show you some of the player control and the camera movement. So if you go into Window, you can go to the package manager and use an input system, and that's what I did. You can kind of see what it looks like right here. So we have an on-foot action map, which has different actions attached to it, which are correlated to different bindings. So W for up, S for down, those kind of things. I followed a tutorial as I was learning these things, and they also showed you how to do the same thing with gamepads. Um, and then from there, you can generate a C# script right over here, generate C# class. And then that gets generated as this player input script, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I did not code this. This is just generated automatically. But as part of the tutorial I followed along, we used an input manager uh, script to basically reference these states like on foot, and then the motor, the look, and the shoot, um, which are different classes that I'll show you later. But in here, it's basically checking for different inputs. So we have like another class called player motor, and we have motor.processMove. So it's basically, it just keeps checking for movement or for the inputs. And then same thing, we have a very similar thing for looking, and we have a player look script that uses that as well. And then as far as jumping and shooting, that's just an action. So we're kind of checking to see if something is performed, whether a certain action is performed, I should say. So we'll first start with player motor. So here's some of the player. This is the player motor class. We reference some components of the player object, and we also have attached animation, which I'll talk about a little later. But it's basically getting these inputs right here, the move direction, and this is the process move method that was referenced in the input manager. And I did make it so that if you press the left shift key or the right shift key, that the speed will increase as well. And then there's also a character controller component that is used for the character to move. And then we have the jump method right here. And then for the player look script, we have X sensitivity, Y sensitivity, and then we have our camera. Basically, we just have, like before, the components that are associated to the script and in the Unity engine. And then we have our process look method that was referenced in the input manager as well. The mouse, and then we have more inputs from the mouse right there. And then we have like a certain range of rotation right here. And then we're actually applying that to the camera here with its rotation. And then we set a couple of different settings for the gamepad and then for mouse. So, because for whatever reason, gamepad sensitivity is a lot slower, so it can't be the same. So I had to adjust that. And that is as far as that goes. That's as far as that goes in terms of player movement and control. And next we'll talk about shooting and collision with bullets. So now, as far as the player's ability to shoot bullets from a gun, we did a couple of things. We had made a couple of scripts and we made a couple of objects in the scene. So as far as the player goes, we attached we have the main camera, and attached to that is our canvas, which has our crosshair, and we also have a bullet spawner attached to the main camera. And the bullet spawner is where the bullets actually spawn. So first I'm going to show you where the shooting is being performed. So if that input is being performed, then the shoot method will run. So if we go to player shoot and we go to the shoot method, first I'll run through some of the components. So we have a prefab named a bullet, and then we have our bullet spawner and our crosshair that are all being referenced. So whenever a player shoots, it'll play the audio clip, the gunshot noise. And then how shooting works is I use something that was very, very new to me called raycasts. So basically, how I kind of think of raycasts is it's kind of like a laser. And basically, the engine uses raycast to detect collision by just rays being shot out like lasers. How I think of it. So it's basically keeping track of where that raycast is hitting. So we're checking if that raycast is being pointed at the crosshairs, because that's where we're aiming at. We're kind of just we're making bullets go on that same position. So we're not really trying to detect anything. We're more trying to just figure out where we're trying to send the bullets based on where the crosshair is. So we have our direction based upon the hit, and then the bullet spawn minus the bullet spawn location or position. And then we're spawning our bullet right here at the with the bullet prefab and at the bullet spawn position, and then also where we're looking in terms of the camera's the rotation. And then we set a velocity of that bullet. And then I even was able to print out to the little console uh, what the bullet was hitting, which will be used um, for enemies when we talk about enemies later. And then the bullet prefab right here. Every bullet will. I try to make it so that the bullet would despawn every time it collided with something. Unfortunately, sometimes if the material is thin enough, like a plain 3D object, sometimes they're very. I mean, they're all thin. They're always thin. So sometimes the bullets wouldn't detect those kind of walls. So I made it so that they'd be destroyed after 5 seconds. And then I'll try to make it so that they would destroy themselves when they collided with certain things, and then they would destroy other things as well. And then if they hit an enemy, then I would say enemy hit. But that's not where the enemy actually loses health. It's actually in the enemy script, which I'll go to later. But I believe that is everything with the bullet, uh, with the player shooting bullets. All right, next I'll be talking about the models that I used and the animations that I used. So I did animations and the models in two different ways. So I first tried to use the enemy model as the player model, and I actually grabbed this model from the Unity asset store. Um, the thing is, with grabbing it from the Unity asset store, it came with a lot of extra stuff. I didn't know what it did. So going to the animator, and I had to kind of figure out what all of this was doing. and I eventually figured it out. But I was able to kind of play around with some transitions, and I was able to set some booleans over here. So I added a couple, walking and running, and these are used in the transitions, as you can see over here. So from idle to the walk, walk is true, but from walk to the idle is walk false. And then similarly with walk to run, it's run is true, and then the other from running to walking, run is false. And I'll show you how that looks in the scripts after I show you how I did the player one. So for the player model and animations, I actually used Mixamo, and I actually this is when it started clicking for me, because I didn't really know what was happening with this asset from the Unity store or Unity asset store that was doing a lot of stuff for me. I didn't know how to cooperate with it basically. So I started over. I followed a YouTube tutorial and I tried Mixamo. So I got this alien soldier model from the from Mixamo, and then I was able to also import some animations that could be used across a whole bunch of different models. So in the animator for this, it looks different. And then this is something I kind of created on my own. I made the rifle run, and that's an animation I imported, and the same thing with the jumping one. And then I made a couple of from booleans over there that had the same concepts that I was just going over. Is moving is true, is moving is false, jumping is true, jumping's false, and yeah, and they all connect together, so that way you're able to jump. You're able to see that jumping animation even if even if you're idling or if you're running. So now I'll go into the scripts and I'll show you what that looks like. So basically, what I did is the if the player is moving, then the animator uh, component up here, right here, yeah, and it gets set right there. Basically, if that is set to true, or the is moving condition is set to true. And then this is what I was trying to experiment with before, but wasn't working. But this is what this tutorial showed me. And then if the player's not moving, then set is moving to false, and it'll go back to its default idle animation. And then it's similar with jumping, and then if you're in the air and if you're not in the air. And then I also did a similar thing with the enemy. I also did the same thing, made an animator component, and then referenced it there. And then I set it. Oh, the enemy is really always walking. It's patrolling back and forth uh, on the map. So if the speed does not equal 0, then the walk state is true. So it'll walk. Otherwise, it will not walk. And I did make it so that there's a death animation once their health is 0 or below 0. And I believe that's it for that. I did put a run. Uh, yeah, right there. There it is. There is a run animation too once the enemy notices you. And I used an on trigger enter method with a collider, with a sphere collider. And that's how I was able to do some of the enemy AI stuff. But yeah, I think that's it for as part. I think that's it as far as the enemy animations and models and the player models and animations. All right, so this is the last segment of this video of my progress on this project. So the last thing that I'll talk about, and I've already talked about it a little, is the enemy AI and the enemy spawner. So the enemy has, I'll even show you what it looks like in the game view. just to kind of give a little refresher on what it all looks like. But there is enemies that are already originally just there right at the beginning. And they have this kind of patrol route that they go on. But first they'll hit that wall, and the ones that spawned are they just go the other way, or maybe I think they collide with that wall and then they start going the other way, because I coded it so when they hit the wall they turn in the opposite direction. So I'll let them get to the other side, and then I'll show you what the AI does, or what the enemy does when the player gets into a certain range of the enemy. So they hit a wall, they'll turn back. And this is what it looks like once you get into their proximity. They run towards you, change their animation, and they move straight towards you. So we'll look at what that looks like in the script. So first we'll go into the enemy, and I just use a sphere collider, like I said before, to detect the player. If they detect an object with the player tag, they'll notice you, and then they'll do their running animation. And then I also have a Boolean called follow. And in the update method, if follow is true, then the enemy will look at the player and will move towards them. And then else they just do their normal patrol. But yeah, it's if they're on their normal patrol, follow is false. So if you moved inside of in that sphere collider where they detect you, if you move in there, they'll follow you, but once you get out, then they'll go back on their normal patrol. I don't know if I showed that, but it does do that. And then as far as the enemy spawner goes, I have the enemy, and I have that cube that they were spawning from before. And I also made a timer so that they wouldn't spawn very rapidly, because then it'll crash the game eventually, as I came to find out. But in the update method, basically just made a very simple timer, and then basically after, I have it every 5 seconds right here, the spawn time. It will spawn another enemy, similar to how the bullets are spawned. You use the instantiate method to spawn an enemy, just like how we did with the bullets at the spawner position, and then the timer resets and then it goes again. But yeah, I think that's just about everything I did over the last couple of weeks, trying to learn Unity. It was a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to applying these skills in future projects. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching me run through this whole little demo that I've been working on. Thank you.